Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This show is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. WBCQ broadcasts out of beautiful Monticello, Maine, up in the Aroostook County area of Maine. And also MP Nation. This was heard on MP Nation, which is an online radio, 4 p.m. on Saturdays, thanks to Jen Coffey. That's sort of a recent addition. The show is brought to you by Camp Constitution. You can visit our website, campconstitution.net, where you will find information about our a week and a day-long summer camp, which we will be having from July 10th to the 17th of 2016. In beautiful the Toanippi Christian Retreat Center in Ringe, New Hampshire. Also, some of the things that we've published they make available on our camp bookstore. In fact, we're actually getting a couple of items that we'll have in print. One of them is State Department Document 7277, 1961, Freedom from War, which shows and documents that it's been a long-time policy of the United States State Department to have a UN standing army, to have civilian disarmament, and a national police. And although this is available currently if you go to Amazon, we thought we would put it back in print to have it more widely known. Also in that same year was a report from the United States Congress. There were hearings held by, I think it was the Judiciary Committee, I'm not certain, and it concerned the communist influence trying to create a national police. And it actually, I went on to Amazon and discovered there was one hard copy available, and it was going for like $35. So we're going to be shortly putting this in print and making it available on our online. It is available on both documents are available as free downloads on our Scribd page, scribd.com/Camp Constitution. You'll see that we've uploaded that and many other, we think, important documents, pamphlets and reprints, including our camp newspapers from our weekly camps and some other items. But there's something else that we put in print on a limited basis. And I do have a few copies, and I could have them available pretty easily. Back in 1979, the United States Senate Judiciary Committee held hearings on Article 5 Convention, and they were trying to get several bills passed that would control an Article 5. And the man who hosted the committee, Orrin Hatch, who's still there, was very much in favor of an Article 5 convention. Anyway, it was about over 1,300 pages, and I had an original copy out of print, unavailable. A few libraries around the country may have it, but I was able to get it into a PDF format, thanks to my good friend Mark Affleck, who lives in Pennsylvania, has been involved with Camp Constitution. And I thought it would be good to have it in print, so we made some copies up. And it cost us, actually, Camp Constitution, about $25 a copy. And because of the thickness of the book, we weren't able to. The printing company we do business with, Town and Country Press in Concord, New Hampshire. Everything we publish, by the way, is published and printed. The paper, everything is made in USA. So what we have is they throw little 3 holes in them, and you can put a ring through it. But it's some very, very valuable document because it has hearings of testimony from people on both sides of the spectrum when it comes to the Article 5 issue, people on the left and right opposing and supporting. But it demonstrates that Congress does indeed think it has some say in Article 5 Convention. Well, they wouldn't have spent all this time with committees. None of the bills that were introduced were passed. I believe they passed the Senate and died in the House. And there's been a number of attempts over the years to have some kind of control But this is available upon request. You can also find it as a PDF download on our Squid page. But if you're interested in getting a copy from me, just give me a call at 857-498-1309, and I'll be happy to send you a copy out. But it's again, there's some really good documents, some good information there. It has a lot of articles that were entered into as evidence going back to the 1950s. Although there hasn't been a lot written at that point, you won't find it in your mainstream journals, but you find stuff like that in your law journals, just like certain things when it comes to medicine you don't find in your daily newspaper or your monthly magazine, but you find it in medical journals, of course. So lawyers and attorneys wrote a lot about the issue, and a lot of the information is available and is very important. We like to think is a very important reprint, especially for those who are trying to stop this latest strive for an Article 5. And anyway, now that we're on the subject of an Article 5, I just want to mention this. I live in Boston, Massachusetts, and this past week, almost 2 weeks ago now, there were hearings in Massachusetts at the State House concerning two resolutions calling for an Article 5. The Wolfpack group, this left-wing group founded by Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, the Holocaust denier, the Romanian Holocaust. I suppose you can get away with that being a Holocaust denier as long as it's not denying the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews, but the 2 million or so people the Turks killed because they were Christians, I guess you can get away with being a Holocaust denier when it comes to that, especially if you're a Turk and a Muslim or pro-Muslim. Anyway, I digress. So they had a resolution sponsored by Wolfpack and one sponsored by a group called Convention of States. Nobody from the Convention of States testified on behalf of their resolution, but there was quite a few people on the left side of the spectrum testifying in favor of Article 5 Convention. Of course, they tell us that they can control a convention, be limited to the topic at hand. But if you read the resolution, it's pretty open-ended. But one of the major themes major goals is to reverse the decision, the Citizens United decision back in 2010, where the Supreme Court said that this organization is a corporation and they're allowed to have free speech like anybody else. And, of course, the idea that all corporations are evil and must be reined in, and they're not really people, but people are made up of corporations, and corporations, we think of a corporation as being some big, nasty international entity that has no interest in the rights of individuals, outsources its jobs as quickly as possible, and all the CEOs get paid millions of dollars as they're polluting the environment. That's what a lot of people, when they think of corporations. And there's probably a little element of truth there, but also a corporation could be a small group of people. It could be a handful. It could be a local Baptist church. It could be numerous things that do a lot of good work. And sure, why couldn't they? Why shouldn't they have a say? But anyway, there were a lot of folks on hand. There were some union people there. We had some folks who were pro-constitutionalists that testified against, although we were outnumbered. However, it was really good to see some people on the left, and there were some people who were very much in favor of the amendment that Wolfpack claims to want to have passed, but where it was against the process. But a lot of the people that testified in favor of Article 5, they really didn't go too much into the convention itself. They were just making a case against corporations and so forth, and so a lot of it was emotional. But we had Catherine White, who's been a guest on this show, an instructor at Camp Constitution. She made some really good points. What was interesting is that the other side were using the word democracy. Every other word was democracy, and Catherine got up there and she said people were a republic. She says learned people. She was really good. And an attorney, Greg Hession, who writes for the New American magazine, and he testified, and he made some excellent points. He actually rebutted a Harvard professor who's one of the folks in favor of Article 5. professor, to his credit, when asked by a member of the committee, and the committee that heard the testimony was the Joint Committee on Veterans and Federal Affairs. And I think there was only one Republican, almost all Democrats. Anyway, the committee member, he was the House ranking chair member, he asked if it could be a runaway convention. And the attorney from Harvard said, highly unlikely. Now, he didn't say impossible. He just said it was unlikely, highly unlikely. Doesn't mean it wouldn't. So he was being honest. But my friend there, Greg Hession, mentioned, he said, I'll read Article 5 so even a Harvard professor can understand. And he came up with a joke that you can always tell a Harvard man, but you can't tell him much. But anyway, so even though we may have been outnumbered and, maybe 5-1, 4-1, we did have some people on the left side that disagree with Article 5, and we made some very good points, and that's really the critical thing. And I said during my testimony that, yes, we've outnumbered here, but you give me a chance to talk to some of these folks, so I'm sure that many of them would come around if they realized really what was at stake here. There was a couple of people that were the lobbyists from Wolfpack. In fact, one of them I had confronted a few years before, and the other one I have confronted personally, but he was in the hearing room. His name was, this particular person is now the executive director, Ryan Clayton, and he was in New Hampshire this past winter where he testified against our resolution, a resolution that we had been supporting to rescind New Hampshire's call. So anyway, we had an interesting, he wanted to talk to me outside, and he did, and he thought I was an attorney, and he had mistaken, thought I had been writing articles in the magazine, the New American magazine, on this subject, and that he was going to sue me for libel if I kept on insisting that George Soros funds Wolfpack. And to my knowledge, what the New American had written is that may not be directly financing Soros, but an entity called the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, his entity is part of the Media Consortium, which is a George Soros-funded group. So it's not likely that Soros is cutting checks directly, but he denied that they were even doing that. So I said, look, I don't want to say something that's not true, if that's the case. But, of course, he has no trouble getting up there and making nasty accusations against organizations that oppose him or oppose Wolfpack. I suppose that's legitimate. But if we say something that may not be true, and by the way, I do not want to, would not want to say something that isn't true. There are things that are called error of facts, where you believe something to be true, you based on some faulty research, and you say it, and okay, I'm not here deliberately saying something I thought was a deliberate lie. It's you thought something was true, you said it. For years, I would say that George Bush didn't sign Agenda 21 because that's what I heard, and talked to my colleague who was there. He said, yes, he indeed signed it. So I had to clarify that. I had no intention of clearing Bush. In fact, that's the last thing I wanted to do, but, truth is truth, and I thought he didn't sign it. So if that's the case, then I will not make the connection, although there's a lot of dirt in this Article 5 convention issue here. There's an organization based in New Hampshire called New Hampshire Rebellion, and they're working very hard to promote an Article 5. And this little grassroots group, when I was talking to Ryan Clayton, and back up a little bit, he was the man that 2 years ago in the summer or late spring, June of 2013 or 2000, I think it was 2013, Indiana State Capitol, they have a conference there by Article 5 supporters, and he's there as a media rep for Young Turks. And there was a group of people, a few people I knew that were sort of there protesting as sort of an outreach, and they held some signs. And he gets in between them, and there's a lady taking a picture on her cell phone of this group, and he flips the lady a middle finger. Not very professional, of this polished, very well spoken fellow, young man that looks good in a suit, gives gives this lady a middle finger, and then he grabs her phone, which would be construed as assault and battery. He emailed it to himself, and then he thought he deleted it, but he didn't delete it. And so we have copies of this person. And so we refer to him as Ryan the Finger Clayton. Anyway, here we are, New Hampshire Rebellion, formed by Larry Lessig. Larry Lessig is the very left-wing Harvard professor that, along with Mark Meckler in 2011, started the ball rolling, so to speak, with his latest Article 5. They held a conference at Harvard in September 2011. And Larry has been very busy. He was a Bilderberg attendee, and he and Mark have shared the stage a few times since then, and Mark formed Convention of States. By the way, they get tons of money. As a matter of George Soros doesn't have to be cutting them checks. They probably don't need his money. So this New Hampshire Rebellion group, and Fight Big Money, I've got a one-page little flyer from them. In fact, I picked this up at the National Center for Constitutional Studies information table, where they're trying to ingratiate themselves with conservative and constitutionalists, but they sort of betray themselves. First off, using the word democracy, and they got a nice office in Concord, New Hampshire. Right behind the state capitol. That costs money to have a staff, doesn't it? And they have all these leaders as part of this rebellion, and it's very interesting. You've got Andrew Hemingway. Andrew Hemingway is a conservative, quotation marks, that ran for governor. Who else we have here? We have, of course, Larry Lessig is on there. We have somebody with director of New Hampshire Listens, Professor Bruce Mallory. And what's interesting about this New Hampshire Listens is that they're also part of or affiliated with Living Room Conversations, a left-wing organization that has the support of Van Jones and Mark Meckler of Convention of States, this alleged Tea Party conservative. So it's interesting how you just do a little research, and here's another guy, Jim Rubens. Jim was a candidate for U.S. Senate. He had run for governor in New Hampshire. He was a New Hampshire state senator. And I met him a number of times. I debated him, and he comes across as a very likable guy. And we debated him, and he's making the accusation that we were supported, the group I'm affiliated with is supported by Soros and so forth, which is kind of ludicrous. So here are these people who are supposed to be conservatives working very hard with these various leftists. And I tell you something, folks, I have no trouble working with groups, left-wing groups or groups I don't agree with when it comes to preventing an Article 5 convention and getting rid of Common Core, for example. Those are two good. I work with liberal groups on this one. But if you think for a minute that if a convention's ever held, you think these people on both sides will get together and sing Kumbaya and hold hands, they're very much mistaken. I would hate to see an Article 5 convention happen, but if one did, it would be so interesting to see how quickly that the Wolfpack types will kick these conservative types to the curb as quickly as they can. I'm of the opinion that these groups like Wolfpack, they hate these Republicans they're collaborating with more than they hate people like me. In fact, they probably have a little more respect for us because at least we're standing up to them. So it's going to be interesting because, again, we hope we never have one. But if they do, we know that these folks will be kicked to the curb. These people think you can hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and well, we have common ground and so forth. Yes, not when it comes to our Constitution. They hate the Constitution. They want to see it repealed. They want to see it destroyed. And you do not. It's one thing to not, if my house was on fire, I called 911. I will not ask the firefighters what religion they are, what their politics are, but I would not work with an arsonist when it comes to, putting out a fire, you see, because arsonist is going to start the fire. Anyway, so for more information about this, by the way, there's a good Facebook page called Stop the Constitutional Convention, where you have a lot of updated information. Something else I want to discuss here, too. I was in a local grocery store, and in the lobby there's a little box. It said, "Imagine Boston 2030." And you would take a little card and you would fill it out. It'd ask you, what would you like to see by 2030? And it said more parks, better schools. What else? This idea of this visualizing. And you would fill it out, and affordable housing, of course, more space, cleaner environment, and things that really, of course you want to see a cleaner environment. Of course you like to have a park in your city and what have you. Of course you want affordable housing. No, I want unaffordable housing. I want to have dirty streets. I don't want to have any parks. But it's this Agenda 21 project. Back just recently, the UN they held another meeting at the UN, Agenda 21 type meeting. They came up with this new term, Agenda 2030, and so then within a short time, you start seeing these entities, a Boston-based entity called Imagine 2030, and of course the mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh. Whatever the Democrat and the New World Order machine wants, he'll be completely happy, whether it's promoting homosexuality, whether it's turning the St. Patrick's Day parade into which celebrates St. Patrick, turning into another homosexual parade. Whatever it takes, he'll do. So his name is on there. And I took pictures of the box. I took some of the little cards with me just to demonstrate that Agenda 21 is alive and well, and this is the kind of nonsense that it promotes. So, but you see what happens is they have to change the name when organizations and groups get a little too controversial, too many people find out about them, that they change the name. Back when the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, was known to be run by communists, so they changed it to the CIA. There was a group called, it was the Federal Churches of America, something like that. It became the National Council of Churches because the earlier version was it became exposed. People knew what it was about. And that happens with many other groups, too. So when they have to change the name, you know something's up. You know that people are catching on, and there's a lot of opposition. There's not enough of it, unfortunately, but there's enough of it. Something else, too, about Agenda 21, part and parcel of Agenda 21 is a complete takeover of schools of the whole world. And Common Core is something that's been introduced in the United States. It's been around for about 4 or 5 years, and thankfully, there's lots of opposition, parental opposition, people on both sides, left and right. In Massachusetts, there's a referendum. Now, not every state has this, but if you have enough signatures in a referendum, you have to get, I think, the equivalent of 3% of the people who vote the last gubernatorial election, or 4%, where that figure is. They have to be certified voters. So 50 or 60,000 signatures have to be, and it's quite a project. Then they have to be certified in each town, and then the question is put on the ballot. It will be put on the ballot. If there's enough signatures, we think we will have them in November of next year, 2016. And then if it's a majority of people say yes, then it still has to go back to the Great and General Court, and you have to get the vote on it for 2 years, 2 consecutive sessions or something like that, before the bill is repealed. It's a long process, but it can happen, and we're hoping that we will. And other states have been fighting in different ways, and some states have turned it down. And I think Indiana was one of the states that recently rejected it. Although I'm told that it may be rejected, but that they still had some elements of it. One of the longtime promoters of Common Core was a man named Mark Tucker, and he may not be a household name, but Mark has been around, and it's spelled M-A-R-C. He's been around a long time. He's an educational elitist. In fact, he was very much involved with Goals 2000 outcome-based education back during the Clinton administration, and he's been involved in this most of his adult life. And it was interesting too when I heard he was going to be in New Hampshire. He's actually going to be in New Hampshire tomorrow, Tuesday, and there are some people who are involved in the Common Core really have not heard him, but some have. And I was able to, when I heard about his presence there, we're going to be challenging him. Back in 1995, my late friend Sam Blumenfeld dedicated a newsletter to him, December of 1995, and I was able to boot up the newsletter, and we're going to have some hard copies. We'll have some available printed up. But here is he wrote an 18-page letter when Bill Clinton got elected for the first time around. And I'm not going to read all 18 pages, but just a few excerpts. Dear Hillary, I still cannot believe you won, but utter delight that you did pervade to all circles in which I move. I met last Wednesday in David Rockefeller's office. This would be the son of David, who's in his 90s. With him, John Scully, Dave Barham, and David Hasselcorn. It was a great celebration. Both John and David were more expansive than I have ever seen them. Literally radiating happiness. Yes, the socialist takeover with the Clinton administration. But anyway, he goes on and on. Our purpose in these meetings was to propose concrete actions that the Clinton administration could take between now and the inauguration and the first 100 days. And we took a very large leap forward in terms of how to advance the agenda on which you and we have been all working. A practical plan for putting all of the major components of the system in place within 4 years by the time Bill has to run again. We think the great opportunity you have is to remold the entire American system for human resource development. So a guy like this is a total statist and an enemy of freedom and limited government, an enemy of the Constitution. And here he is speaking at the State House, invited by an educational committee run by Democrats and Republicans. In fact, the two Republicans, Ladd and Wolf, wouldn't you know that they support the Wolfpack Article 5 Convention? So it's going to be kind of interesting to be able to confront these two people tomorrow. Confront Mr. Tucker and let lots of people know what this fellow's about. And why would anybody calling themselves a conservative or an advocate of limited government be even in the same room with this man? So, anyway, our time is almost up. This is the fastest half an hour in radio. But I do want to, again, thank you for listening. You can find this program archived on YouTube. We have all of the shows that air on this station are put up on YouTube, and I think I'm 1 or 2 behind, but my last week's guest was Dr. Dick Pesta, whom I'll be with this week. Looking forward to seeing him again. And before that, we had Scott Lively, and so Scott's presentation is up there. Also, if you're interested in maybe you like what you hear and maybe you want to put it on, if you have some kind of blog or some kind of online radio, be happy to rebroadcast. Just let me know about it so I can help promote it. So with that, I want to thank you for listening and also encourage you to visit our website, campconstitution.net, and you can learn about our camp program and all the great things that we do at Camp Constitution. So good night and God bless.